Okay, so here I am joining you from this super spooky forest because forests are usually a really nice hiding place for monsters. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this particular module. So I wanted to start out with something that Neil Gaiman said about monsters. And he said, monsters come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are things people are scared of. Some of them are things that look like things people used to be scared of a long time ago. Sometimes monsters are things people should be scared of, but they aren't. And that's a really excellent way to introduce how monsters appear in Gaiman's works. And so, in general, right, monsters have a dual function in society, culture, literature, right? So one of the functions of a monster is a warning or an omen. Um, and these warnings or omens can be in relation to the world we know or think we know, or they can be in relation to things about the world that we wish we could explain. Um, so, if you think about it this way, in terms of how monsters function as warnings or omens, monsters are things that shouldn't be, but somehow are. And that's when we think about the word monstrous, right? It has that sort of literal meaning of something that is a monster, but then also monstrous can mean unnatural. Um, so um, it shouldn't be, but it is. And so the reason why this engenders fear is because it forces us to question our understanding of and place in the universe. And so there are multiple questions that monsters and the monstrous raise for us. What does it mean to be good and evil, or evil? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a monster? What separates the two? In what ways are the two alike? Um, so it, and then it's a duality because monsters, while yes, they are warnings or omens in the very bad, very negative sense, and they create fear because they make us sort of question all of the world that we thought we knew, and our place within it. Monsters can also be all inspiring. So they can be all full and they can be all full, right? Um, they can make us afraid, but they can also make us intrigued. They can invite wonder, that this thing that shouldn't be is, right? So they can inspire wonder that way. And also, in a really weird way, they can sometimes inspire desire, um, and maybe even hope. So, you know, if all monsters did was make us afraid, then and create negative feelings, then we wouldn't enjoy reading about them and watching them in movies, and going to haunted houses where we're, scared by them. Um, so they can also engender positive feelings. And so this is kind of the dual nature of monsters. And I wanted to just kind of read a quote. This is a quotation um, by Timothy Beale. And I'm actually getting this from Critical Insights, Neil Gaiman. So he said, uh, both religious experience and horror are characterized as encounters with something simultaneously awesome and awful. Um, so, in many ways, when we encounter a monster or something monstrous, it's very much the same kind of uh, experience as a religious experience, in that it can create these seemingly dichotomous emotions. Um, and so they can be scary, but also desirable. Um, so keep these things in mind as you're reading Gaiman. Um, this kind of multiple ways that we experience monsters and the different emotions and psychological responses that monsters inspire in us. And I wanted to bring up one other quotation from Neil Gaiman. And he says, um, if you're protected from dark things, you'll be left with no protection of knowledge of or understanding of dark things when they show up. So for him, in addition to functioning as a warning or an omen, monsters are also educational. They're also a source of knowledge, because they prepare us for the dark things. And I think my argument is that within Gaiman's work, you're going to find sort of two sources of knowledge that we gain from monsters and the monstrous. One being that not all monstrous things are monsters. So I've used the quotation before, um, of how Gaiman subverts our expectations of horror, right? To pull that particular genre out of that list. So the things, as he said, right? Sometimes they look like things that people were scared of a long time ago. So what is monstrous is not always the same. It changes, right? Just as myth changes. And also sometimes things that we should be afraid of, we're not, because we're not recognizing them as monstrous when in fact they are. Um, so I think for Gaiman in his work, what we're going to find is that monsters serve as a source of knowledge, an initiation, oftentimes for characters who are children, right? Or characters who are naive. They're innocent, right? Of sort of the dangers of the world. And so what monsters teach them is that looks can be deceiving, and that things that perhaps look monstrous um, aren't necessarily monsters, and vice versa, right? Things that look innocent and human and good aren't necessarily so. And then the second sort of source of knowledge that I think monsters provide in Gaiman's work is that monsters can be defeated, right? So one of the things, and I'm paraphrasing very loosely because I don't have it in front of me, but it makes me think about something that he said along the lines in talking about kind of, myth and fairy tales, that they're truer than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be defeated, right? So they educate us about sort of the illusions and the realities of the world, and not to base our judgments on perception alone. And then also that when we learn to recognize the true monsters, the truly monstrous, um, that it's okay to be afraid of that, but it can be defeated, right? And so that's an important a piece of knowledge that we'll see the characters in the stories that he writes involving monsters. We'll see them learning that within the process of the story. Um, so I think with our common text for this module, Snow Glass Apples, we get, this is a really nice encapsulation of all of these aspects of monsters that I've mentioned. That they are, they can have a sort of dual function as an omen in the negative sense, but then also an omen of sort of wonder, something that expands our reality and expands our knowledge and our understanding of the universe and what it means to be human, and what it means to be good, what it means to be evil. And how to protect ourselves against the evil and the dark and the monstrous. Once we have gained the knowledge to identify it, that we can indeed defeat it. And so look for these things within Snow Glass Apples, and also within the a la carte book that you select from this module, and see how Gaiman is playing with these things. And again, this idea of subversion, that sometimes in Gaiman's work, the hero doesn't necessarily win. And sometimes it's the monster who gets to tell the story because they're the victor, right? And the victor gets to write the history. And so again, for us as the reader, it's a type of education that we take stories for granted, and we read them a certain way. And that again, this idea of artifice and illusion, and that our version of reality and our understanding of a story may not be the reality. And so we have to be as careful as readers of these worlds as the characters within them. So I'll leave you with that, and the spooky sort of twist that we have in Snow Glass Apples.